I was asked to share a little bit of my life history. I just wanted to mention I come from a middle class family, like I guess most of you do. My father was in the army. My mother was a doctor, but a teaching medical doctor. So she was in preventive and social medicine. So she wasn't really a clinical doctor. Uh, Fortunately, while my dad was posted all over the country, which is what an army life is, my mother was fixed. And so I ended up initially in Calcutta. I was born and brought up there. And then I came to Delhi for 4 years when my dad left the army and got posted to Delhi. In 1962, he got pulled in for the Chinese war. I don't know how many of you remember that. And my mother got a postdoctoral fellowship at Ford Foundation. So I was sent to a boarding school. And I finally finished at the Doon School in Dehradun. In 1964, I joined IIT Kharagpur to do electronics 65 to 70. And, you know, like everyone in IIT in those days, my plan was to go overseas. Uh, for whatever reason, I ended up staying in India and joined DCM as a senior management trainee. 5 years in DCM, I was lucky that they decided to get into electronics. And I was one of the few electronics engineers in the company when they took that decision. DCM, by the way, I don't know how many of you, well, I guess you know the name, but it used to be a conglomerate in cloth, rayon tire cord, fertilizers, chemicals, food. Rath Vanaspati was their product. So electronics was a small part of their business. Out of the, I guess, out of the 250 crores that their revenue was at that time, and they were the fourth largest company in the country, electronics was 1.7 odd crores. Uh, India was a socialist country in those days. There was something called the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act. And DCM, being a large private company, was not allowed to get into new areas. We wanted to get into computers. Microprocessors were just coming out in the mid 70s. DCM decided in their logic that they shouldn't get into it because they'll run afoul of the government. And so 6 of us decided to leave and start what you today know as HCL, Hindustan Computers Limited. It started in my grandmother's Barsati. And, I've got to say, we didn't have a business plan. We didn't have any money. And we didn't know what the word entrepreneur didn't exist in those days. In 1975, you were a businessman or you were an employee. That was the way life was. I think in timing was right. The good news was there weren't too many jobs available in India at that time, so we were able to get some of the best people we could find from some of the leading colleges, and basically grew the company on that basis. So I guess all of you know or have heard of HCL. I presume today it's a 250,000 person organization. Now has moved away from hardware. We were originally a hardware company and has moved into services. But I've got to say, at that time, we took out our first commercial computer, 8-bit commercial computer, the same month and year in which Apple took out the Apple One here in Silicon Valley. And in hindsight, when I look back at that, and India being a closed country, uh, I think that was an amazing achievement. We had no idea at that time that that's what it was. But what we also did was build computers that were specific to India. So because we had a lot of power failures in India, and you still have, I guess, power failures at some parts, computers don't behave very well with power failures because to recover from a failure is fairly complicated. And in those days, there weren't too many programmers. And that's a different story. And I'll tell you how we started NIIT also. But basically, we used a truck battery and we built something called a power shut-off auto restart. So if the power failed, the truck battery held all the registers at the point where the computer had stopped. And when the power came back, the computer started from exactly the point where it had stopped, right? again, it's something that even today people don't build into their hardware. But we had it because at that time we felt that our buyers were not sophisticated enough or didn't have enough good programmers who could recover from a JCL or whatever you need to do to recover the computer from where it failed, where it stopped when a power failed. Okay, so I just want to bring that up because it was specific to India, and I think we need to design products that are specific to our country. Things have changed today. Today, you see, say, tablets coming from Samsung and Lenovo and Apple, which are made for a different market. They're not really made for rural kids who are doing education or want to do online education in India. We still have the same problems, and we don't have the how should I put it, the money, or we don't have the finances to replace it every 2 3 years. We need to get a product that will give us a longer life. We need to get a product that will actually be repairable, and we need to get a product that will, like the old cell phones. I don't know how many of you remember them. We used to have a replaceable battery that you could charge separately, so that if you needed additional battery power, your phone could last longer. I think someone needs to design a tablet that will work that way. And that is what I think our rural market needs. So I'm talking from the area I know and a market I know. But this is something I think, as they mentioned, many of you should be thinking of, because these are problems that you see probably every day. Obviously, sitting at IIT Roorkee, and I've been to Roorkee. I've actually sold hardware, computers to Roorkee University at that time, as it was known, way back in the late 70s, early 80s. So if you come across some old HCL computers somewhere in your godowns in IIT Roorkee now, you'll know who is the one who put it there many, many years ago. I I sort of decided, I had retired when I turned 50. I thought, I was traveling a lot. I was out 20 days, maybe 25 days a month. Visited parts of India that I'd never seen because the government policy was to start factories at remote areas. I saw more of India when I was selling HCL computers. Went to Madura Courts at Ambasamundaram, to Loyal Textiles at Kovilpatti, uh, you know, I can name places that you probably never heard of, but there are computers and were computers in all those places that we had placed. When I turned 50, or I was close to turning 50, I thought I'd retire. But before I get to that story, let me take a minute to tell you one of the problems we had was we were selling 200 computers a year. We wanted to expand to 1,000 computers a year. The problem was, where were we going to get 1,000 air conditioners? Where were we going to get 1,000 voltage stabilizers? And where were we going to get 1,000 programmers to run those computers? And that was India in those days. So while the air conditioners and the voltage stabilizers was not a problem with us, we talked to Voltas, etc. For the air conditioners, we talked to some startups to make UPS type devices that we could use. We decided that we need to train people ourselves to be good programmers, because people were giving us certificate without really giving them any training. And so we actually funded one of our employees, Rajendra Pawar, RS Pawar, who now the chairman of NIIT, and started NIIT. And basically, uh, it was the way we funded it is 80% of it was funded by the HCL founders, and 20% was kept for the employees. And I'm sure some of you have heard of NIIT. It is still fairly big. At one time, it was the largest training IT uh, training organization in the country, probably in the world at one time. But yeah, that's basically, once you start something, uh, lots of startups happen. People made stabilizers. I mean, lots of things happen. And of course, I also want to mention it's not that everything was success. As they mentioned, we started believing that we could once we were successful, we started believing that we could make any product and make it work. And we thought, let's get into point of sale systems. And we actually made an electronic cash register, little realizing that that was a mainly mechanical device with very little electronics. There was electronics. And basically, we had to sell it to Bradma because that wasn't we weren't experts in that area. Mechanical wasn't really our strength. Electronics was our strength. After I retired, I thought I didn't, my big mistake was I didn't plan my retirement. So I got thrown out of the house and I was told to go work from a business center. You can't, I started interfering in how the house was running, which doesn't work out too well. And so we ended up trying to look at what was going on in the business I understood at that time. I had come to the US in 89 from HCL to start HCL America, which is now HCL Technology. And I realized that we were doing, how should I put it? We were a lower cost vendor, and that's how most people saw Indian IT. And I thought we needed to change that image, and there was an opportunity in trying to be domain specific. That is, don't talk to the IT guy, to CIO, go talk to the business guy, solve the business problem by leveraging technology. And so that's what we did when we started TechSpan and morphed it into Headstrong. And we decided that instead of, you look at multiple company websites, they're $20 million and they claim they're experts in 10 areas. It doesn't make sense because if you're doing an average of $2 million in an area, how can you be an expert? So we decided to focus on one vertical, this whole thing about diversify and et cetera, et cetera. That's a good strategy at some places, but our model was domain expertise, focus in one area. And we thought the IT industry or the IT services industry would move in that direction. I think my timing was wrong. It's now starting to move there. And we started this way back in 99. So I think we were many years, 20 years off the target. But that's the way the industry is moving. And we grew Headstrong to about 220 million by 2011. We actually focused on the investment banks, capital markets, and that's really all we did. And we were experts in that area. And we were seen as experts in that area by our customers. Our billing rates were higher. And so we ended up selling it to Genpact in 2011 for 550 million. And what I've been doing ever since then is working with startups, specifically in the areas of education and healthcare, trying to leverage technology basically to try and get better outcomes for the economically underprivileged in India. And Magic Software is an edtech company that does exactly that. What we decided in education, or what I decided to do in education, was try and adapt digital content for the learning handicap. Whether you're visually handicapped or hearing handicapped or you have ADHD, or there are 101 things that make people handicapped in terms of how they learn. And I thought we would adapt the digital content that is going to be available for them so that they can take advantage of it. Unfortunately, India is not ready for that right now. And while we are working specifically with the government of Delhi, they are saying after 2023, they will start talking to us. The US is a big market. And so we are focused, Magic, while its back office is in Noida, we are focused in, the markets are the US and so-called Western countries, if I use that term. But in healthcare, we are doing a lot of interesting work in India. Again, I'll try and define the problem. So, because as Day said and people mentioned earlier, you have to solve problems. You have to first identify them and then you have to solve them. And you have to find a unique way of solving them. And that's the way you've got to think. So I looked at it that every doctor I know in the city is overworked. They work long hours. And forget the rural areas, there are hardly any doctors there. And I thought why can't I look at where doctors are spending non-patient facing time and see how we can automate that so they spend less time on that and can spend more time with patients. And so the first thing you look at is they write the prescription. So you can automate that, but then you have to set up an electronic health record behind it. And that's what we did initially. And as we did that, we collected a lot of data because India is a high volume place in number of patients. And now what we do is using AI, we are able to, we do triaging for the patient, and we have a non-nurse. You can have any normal person do the triaging. Based on the triaging and the symptoms that the patient has, the system starts asking questions. You answer them, it asks more questions. And at the end of it, it takes out, it does its own diagnosis and provides it in medical jargon to the doctor. And we are seeing that today it's saving doctors 30 to 50% of their time. And as we get feedback through machine learning, through ML, basically, I can update the AI and become more and more efficient, especially in certain disciplines in medicine. And we are hoping that we are able to save doctors 70 to 90% of their time, and so that they can see more patients. Because if you look at it, if I need more doctors and I invest today, it's going to take me 10 years before they become available. And as you're aware, there's not very much investment going on in that area. Whereas the number of people coming into the medical system for healthcare is going up 18%, 12%, depending on how the economy is going. So I just wanted to give that as an example. Of course, it also allows me to do telemedicine because now I can have a remote doctor who doesn't have to spend too much time. He doesn't have to sit in front of a terminal. I can get him to be effective for volume with much less time that they have to dictate or give to get this done. So I just wanted to give that as an example so that as you all come into the real world from your college, you start thinking of some of the real problems that exist. There was a time where I would have said, and I still suggest that people should work for a few years before they become entrepreneurs because the real world is very different to what you have in college. You must know why people don't pay you on time, how you have to chase payments. I mean, there are lots of those things that you have to learn in the real world before you become a successful entrepreneur. So my recommendation is work for a while, understand how the world works, understand the issues, look for something that you want to change, and then do it. But technology is allowing a lot of young kids straight out of college to do some very amazing things. And so you have a lot of successful people who become entrepreneurs straight out of college, and good for them. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my journey. I'm like most of you. I come from similar background. Had my parents spent a lot of money on my education, which I think is one of the things that has made a big difference, at least for me. Uh, my professors, my teachers, my friends, my colleagues, and I, I mean, I give a lot of credit to my 5 years at IIT Kharagpur and my teachers there for not so much teaching me electronics, but basically teaching me how to think and how to look at problems and try and see how to find solutions. I think that's what engineering teaches you basically, is if you have a problem with 1,000 variables, how you can identify the 4 or 5 key variables and then sub-optimize the solution from there. That's actually something that'll work. So I leave you with that thought. Thank you.